Um, so I've been last week I spoke from the Gospel of Luke, and I wanted to get to the parable of the one we call the prodigal son, or the man who had two sons. But today, I just got different level of energy. We might get to that depending on the time. But I wanted to read something from a beloved a person. I can't put a label on her. We lost Dolly Parton this couple days ago, and I loved her music. I loved her life story. I loved her as a person. She was a fantastic person. And I usually don't bring pop culture into these talks, but I was reading a little thing about her, and it just I'll just give you the two paragraphs and I'll dive in. And it was serendipity. I was working with a different part of the same chapter, preparing for tonight, and this came my wife again. I can't blame her for a lot of things, by the way. I told her the other day she's almost like the wife of Columbo, for those of you who remember. But she was reading this article out loud to me, and I said, send it to me because I'm going to use it tonight. It's an alignment. So Dolly was never shy at expressing her Christian faith. Parton was also a public supporter of the LGBTQ community who advocates for marriage equality and spoke up in defense of transgender people. She did. And this is a quote from her from a show from 2017 interview with Larry King. I keep saying, if you are the fine Christian that you think you are, why are you judging people? She continued to say, that's God's job. So thank you, Dolly, for kicking off my talk tonight the right way. And the chapter I'm talking about, the chapter I wanted to get into, came actually from a question or a comment that was placed on Dr. Eriko's last talk, which I titled or retitled, The God of Jesus. There is no God of wrath in the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth. And Dr. Eriko did a wonderful job explaining where that stuff came from. And a lot of it does exist in the Hebrew Bible. And we good Christians, after Jesus left us, did an awesome job at incorporating some of that, plus the teachings of Paul, plus including the book of Revelation in the Bible, in what we call the Holy Bible. And we brought a whole bunch of wrathful God back in. And I've been talking, just like I did on the last time, I've been talking about how Jesus was switching that. He really did an awesome job. It's unfortunate that we don't focus on that. We have a ton of material from Jesus about what I just gave you the Lord's Prayer. It opens. He opened it. He didn't say, "Oh, wrathful God, oh, scary big God in the sky." He opened the Lord's Prayer with awun, a term of endearment, a term that invokes a lot of emotions, that when you have a good parent or good parents, and you call them in. What do we say? I know in my culture, I know when I'm in pain, one of the words I say is yamma, which is my mom, or yaba. That's how we run when we're little kids, and when we got an owie or injured our knee when we fell or something, we go to the people who care for us. And Jesus saw that, and he saw from studying the whole Hebrew Bible and studying the culture he was growing up in. He saw that if you have good parents, you don't your world is way better. They prepare you, they care for you, they educate you well, they put you always in an advantageous position. And I know that that's unfortunate that when somebody who's going to listen to this, so a few people will say, my parents were horrible, my parents were awful. I know, whatever I totally feel, and I think a lot of I was thinking, it's like, what about the kingdom? right? It's like if we keep missing bringing this kingdom into presence. Would these parents be horrible parents if they grew up in an environment that is based on the teachings of the kingdom? Would we have the genocide that takes place today in Sudan, in different parts of Africa? It is just the way we disvalue life, that the way we just dismiss and deal with numbers when it comes to people. 17 kids got stabbed here, 24 kids got bombed there. I mean, we just, would that be the kingdom? If we are to snap our fingers today and bring in a world that's based on the teachings of Jesus, would we have that? So I think part of why we might have bad parents, the reason why we have bad people in society and politics and so forth, is that we've lost focus. And I think that if we go back and try to create a society based on our brotherhood and sisterhood, we are all one big family. And that's why Jesus opened with the Awun. And in chapter 7 of Matthew, I went back to it. That's as I said, what took me there was a comment that came in from on our YouTube channel, and I was starting with kind of way later in the chapter on verses 21 and 23 is where the comment came from. And it intrigued me because it's been a while. It's like, what is the context of that comment? The person who submitted it, and if you're listening to this, more than happy to send me your comments. But they put in something that, when Jesus said it, and it was put on the comment was placed on the video from last week when Dr. Eriko talked about there is no wrathful God in the ministry of Jesus. It's kind of, it's like, okay, but Jesus said these kinds of things, and he always said things as a prophet, as an educator, as a teacher. He was fantastic in being global, being universal. And so I'll get to that part, but not to lose perspective of what Dolly said to Larry King a few years ago. Chapter 7 opens, and it's a continuation, as I've said that probably 100 times now, maybe more. There were no chapters. This was just an ongoing text. But for us to find things, it's chapter 7. Jesus says, "Judge not, that you may not be judged." One of his most famous sayings, I think. But it comes on the heels of how God judges, how God's judgment is different than our judgment, how his sun shines on the good and the wicked, how his rain falls. His goodness is spread to all of humanity. There is no discrimination. We want discrimination. I can't tell you how many times I have to this is my own personal struggle when I see that the pain that's inflicted on humanity, by actual human beings, by people who are just sitting in an office, sometimes ignorant of where their shipment is going and what they're manufacturing, and what that little part that they make, very proudly, they put their name and sweat onto it, how that can become a part of a machinery that can be destroying homes, or stealing land, or fencing off a family from their home. I mean, we play our little part, and there are 7 billion, almost 8 billion of us now in the world, and we often take this excuse that, you know what, I'm just one person. But we are not. We're connected. We're communities. We're spiritual community, whether we like it or not. And regardless of the label, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, none this, none that. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're breathing the same air. At the end of the day, we're living on the same earth. We are using the same waters and all its goodness from fish and from What it gives us in so many ways, the power it generates to create electricity. It's all there. Almost every person who goes to space comes back thinking, what the heck are we doing? Because you don't see the borders from space. You don't see the nationalities. You just see this beautiful blue planet that we are blessed to have. So God's good planet, that beautiful thing with the storms and the rain and the sunshine that allows us to raise some beautiful fruit and vegetables and healthy stuff that we can live on, doesn't judge. And Jesus warns, because in judgment, we we switch that. And as I said, I struggle with it. And I always, my step back, what I remind myself is that if we all too, I think I try to demonstrate the kingdom in my life in the majority of my time. And when I slip, I go running back to the kingdom. And it's like, I repent, and that, I just turn back to God, and I remember this no wrath in God, that I'm a representative of God. I need to act the same way. So with the same judgment that you judge, you will be judged. With the same measure with which you measure, it will be measured to you. So Jesus was very clear. It's like, drop that. That's not our business. Now, he also tells us before that when you do something wrong, he counts on us. Remember, I said we have 7 or 8 billion of us, and we are smart, and we have the tools and know how to actually implement these things. Now, when somebody slips, Jesus warns, and in his case, he warns that society takes care of you, not God. God loves you. Whether you end up in jail, whether you end up at the guillotine, whether you end up getting away with whatever bad you've done, God loves you. Your psychology, your upbringing, is what actually ends up making you feel the pain. And society sometimes, if they catch you, they don't have the same perspective. Our laws are not written by God. Our laws supposedly are based on, but the reality of it is no. That we don't base our laws on the God of Jesus. We might base the laws on the God of Moses, which was a different type of God. That's why Jesus used Awun. Moses didn't use Awun. He didn't use the father. He didn't use the parent. And he goes in and he explains, for whoever asks receives, and whoever seeks finds, and to him who knocks, the door is open. So God, as I said, I always come back to the kingdom. I have never felt that I'm rejected, no matter what my thought pattern was, because I just had to recorrect and reconnect. Or who is the man among you? So he's talking to men, because this is again cultural. So don't talk, it's like, who's the parent among you who, when his child asks him, it says son, asks him for bread, will hand him a stone? And this ties straight back to Jesus's beginning of his ministry, when he was starving in the desert, and he started seeing the stones as loaves of bread, and his temptation to break his fasting and get back to society, was driving him. Hunger is a big driver, and we see hunger as a driver today. Though we have plenty, we still use it. We starve people by creating wars, by creating embargoes, and we think we're smart. We're breaking them. It's like, why would you break another human being? They're your brother and sister. Don't do that. So who would give him a stone? No good parent would trick a kid to go break their teeth on a stone. They would go and work really hard on giving them what they need. Or if he should ask him for fish, will hand him a snake. And, again, this is a simplistic way of Jesus, and we complicate the heck out of it. And I think that's the barrier to the kingdom, to be honest, is the complication we put in religion, in society, in politics. If we go back to the very basics, Jesus kept it very simple. and yet made it. I mean, he did not intend to make it hard, but that simplicity is what makes it very hard for people to follow. And that's our job, is to break it down and say, just trust. That's why he counted on our faith. He said, just take that first step into trusting your brothers and sisters. Tell them shlama, tell them peace upon you, and ask them to give you that peace back. And that's part of the culture. Even enemies, when they came into the territory, culturally, you were supposed to honor them at least for 3 days and 3 nights and feed them and give them shelter and so forth. And that's their way of saying, I'll give you free, safe passage. You might have landed here by mistake. You might have business somewhere. I'll let you through, but don't linger. And that's, why not linger? If you're a good person, why not linger? And this is Jesus. He didn't put limits on how much you can love, how much you can forgive, how much you can take care of others. So this is the father he's talking. This is the parent he's talking to. That's the relationship that he wants us to have. So if therefore you who err know how to give good gifts to your sons, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? So then he gives the more stuff. But let me jump to, let me see, how am I doing on time? Let me jump to the verses that I wanted to address as well. So jumping on to verse 21 in chapter 7. Sorry, 21 and 7. It is not everyone who merely says to me, my Lord, who will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. So this is how he sets it up. And he lays it out. What is the will of my Father in heaven? He did not leave that. Love one another. Forgive your enemy. Take care of the orphans. Take care of the widows. He did list a very small list and a very easy to implement list, and answered how to get there. And the one who forgives, the one who has faith. Those are, so that's the will of the Father in heaven. A great many will say to me in that day, my Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name, sorry, cast out devils, and in your name do many wonders? So this is Jesus predicting and seeing how the Jewish religion, how what we call Judaism evolved, right? We have the God of Israel, Yahweh, and we've had a lot of prophets throughout the history, and there were false prophets. And he knew that the day will come soon after his departure, and maybe even while he was still alive, that people will start using his name, his brand, to deceive people, to do wrong things and say, hey, this is, and think about the evolution of our churches. Think about the evolution of Christianity. How many wars were actually, how many wars are still, I say were and still are initiated by this religion of Jesus? We labeled it as Christianity, and now we have to this. I mean, we're doing some really nasty stuff even, this day. So I'm not talking about even recent history. I'm talking about what we live in today and what some people are trying to execute today by creating religious hatred. And I'm focused on Christianity because that's what I teach on. But that exists in every religion. We're seeing it in Judaism. We're seeing it in Hinduism. We're seeing it in Buddhism. We see it in Islam. Everybody and is fulfilling this prophecy. This is a prophecy. So what Jesus talks about here is a prophecy that people will use religion, will use the good message, will use the good book, the good news, the gospel, to execute a different agenda, to label it as if it was his. And he says, Then I will declare to them, I have never known you. Keep away from me, O you that work iniquity. Therefore, whoever hears these words of mine and does them, he is like a wise man who built his house upon a rock. And the rain came and fell. So he gives you, he basically said, if you want to build a strong foundation, I'm giving you the strong foundation. And if you want to use it for your purposes, for your agenda, then it's going to fall apart. He predicts that all these false teachings will be exposed and will fall apart. And we are in a constant cycle of it. That's why I keep saying we need to break that cycle. We need to just have faith as humanity to move in the direction of the kingdom. And maybe I'm naive, and sometimes part of that struggle that I told you about is feeling that maybe I am naive. Maybe there is a reason for people to, carry weapons and go get rid of the bad people. But that cycle has never been successful. I do not recall any time in history, recent and far away, where that type of structure paid back and in full peace and tranquility, in long-lasting peace and prosperity. It doesn't last. It lasts maybe a little period of time, but then usually the oppressed who won become the oppressors. And we see that cycle, close your eyes, open a map and put your finger on it and go to another website and say, okay, give me the history of this thing that I just put my finger on, and you'll see that cycle. You'll see that, oh, the blah, blah, blah were the minority and blah, blah, blah led them and they were a hero and they wrote poems and blah, blah, blah. And now they became the oppressor and they, killed a lot of the other people. And that's just, and they took their property and then, and they, for 200 years, and you see that cycle again and again and again. And genocide is not the answer either, because it's, I mean, I would say today it's impossible to execute a genocide. But even genocide, which is, it's in the Bible. That's the scary part, is that when Jesus was studying this, he saw that even prophets lost their perspective. Prophets who spoke about Yahweh, the prophets of Yahweh, the ones we absolutely love, the Mikas and the Ezekiels and the you name it. I mean, I can just flip any page. The Samuels, they all Isaiah, they all lost that perspective. When they got robbed for some odd reason, they took their tribal roots and stood by that. They took 10, 20, 50 steps back and told their people, let's go get them. And then at the same time, they were often talking about, let's, love and take care of people and take care of our widows and so forth. But often they closed it down into the tribe, into just my people. Jesus opened it, he ripped it, and he paid the price for it. That's the main reason Jesus the life was exterminated early. They saw the danger in him, and thank goodness that the 12 or maybe the 50 or 100 that he adopted and taught these things carried it forward and gave us that text, gave us his simple parables, gave us his simple sayings. Maybe even, did a good job in compiling it into a Sermon on the Mount and to give us, the core teachings. Yet we messed up again, and we bound this book and we made it a holy Bible, all of it, everything that comes with it. And, as Dr. Eriko said last week, we wrote it. God did not write it. He inspired us. God inspires our creativity. And this is a history of a people as well. So it is also a limited perspective. Until we get to Jesus, you get that global perspective. And he himself had to navigate that to maintain his credibility early on in his movement. He had to even avoid talking to people outside this circle. Also, there is a limitation, which was, Romans did not have the same ancestry. They did not know who Isaiah was. So he couldn't just go stand in the middle of Rome and talk about, Isaiah or Moses and expect the Romans to understand. So when he was early on teaching and other people started seeing his light shine, he held back, and society was watching him as well. So he, in his maturity as well, he had to overcome these things to give us that universal uh, Father who we can all relate to give us that universal prophet that we have today that we can rely on. So that's what I really wanted to cover today. I don't see any questions. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A and feel free to add to that. And since I have time, I'll go ahead and continue. So the parable. All right, okay, thank goodness I kept the marker. Um, so Jesus as the son, and I talked about the cultural aspect of that. He gives this parable that was very controversial in so many ways to the people who were listening to him, who were Semites, who most likely the bulk of them were also followers of what we call Judaism. And Jesus said to them, I'm jumping here to Luke 15, continuing what I started a couple of weeks ago. A man had two sons. And as I told you last time, that's when you start pulling on your beard because conflict is coming. Because when you have two sons, the dynamic, and in all of the Bible, look at all the brothers in the Bible almost have issues. So Jesus introduces immediately by two sons, tension lands. And I give you a whole bunch of examples. If you forgot, listen to 2 weeks ago. And Jesus, so here, and his younger son. So he starts with the younger one. So we know the older, and we can assume. See, if you're Semite and you go like, okay, it's going to be about the older one because usually that's the one that the dynamic is kind of could be messy, and that's Jesus when he was talking about himself being the Hidayah, the first son. You want him to talk about that. You want to get more of that because he always said, hey, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, you've seen God, right? And all of you will be sons of God. So his mission was to awaken all of us into our son or daughtership, into our childhood of being related to Allah, this loving, giving presence. So, but when he goes to the young son, you go like, okay, now it's going to be messy. And sure enough, now, and his younger son said to him, my father, give me a portion which is coming to me from your house. So he asks for his inheritance. Now remember, this is a Semitic culture. The inheritance by default goes to the oldest son. And the oldest son then takes all of this stuff and cares for the family, cares for his mom, if there were other widows of the father, because they had polygamy, that was part of the culture. And the land, the laborers, the sisters, the other brothers, he took care of all of that. That was expected. He was being trained to do that. So by the younger one coming and asking for his share, he just crossed a line. So what do we expect the father? Which in this case, Jesus is using the father as the father, the Awa. So he's playing with that. So, and he divided to them his possessions. He just gave it to him. He just took a chunk of money, chunk of property, and said, here you go. You asked for it. I'll give it to you. Because remember, we were reading in a different book, a different chapter. Knock, and the door will open. Ask, and you shall receive. Okay, so Jesus is in line. I always said Jesus is so good, no matter where. If you want to pick people follow red line Bibles and so forth, you don't need that. You need to find those seven, eight truths, you write them down, and then you follow Jesus in any gospel, and you'll see that he's consistent. He's telling the same thing. So he gave him the money. And after a few days, his younger son gathered everything. If you got all your inheritance, you don't have to live under the authority of your older brother or your parents. You're free. And you got this, something you've never had before. You had access to what you were expecting as your inheritance. Gathered everything that was his share and went to a far country. And there he wasted his wealth in extravagant living. So I've seen that. I've seen that when I came here to college. Luckily, my parents were were basically giving me exactly how much I needed, and I had to manage every penny. But I've seen people who had very rich scholarships and rich parents who basically felt the more I give you, the happier you'll be. So I've seen this scenario with my own eyes of people flipping their car every few months and getting a new one when they got out of the hospital, and staying in freshman year for after staying in language studies, preparing their English for like a year or two, and then staying freshman for 2 or 3 years, and eventually going back without a degree. I've seen that. So this is what this kid did. He went and he blew his money, and when all he had was gone, there was a severe famine in that country, and he began to be in need. So, again, if he would have survived that, Jesus makes it really dark, right? Not only did he blow all his money, he actually is now in a place that doesn't have a way to support him. He has no chance to learn skills, use skills, and when you're in a foreign land, we see it everywhere to this day. When things get bad, when things are prosperous in a land, and you're coming at it from a prosperity perspective, there is more to share. Bring in the immigrants, bring in, I want to live the luxury. I let somebody else do the hard work and so forth. But then when the famine comes, when things are tight, when the economy is shrinking, when we have high inflation, when the gas is expensive, who do we look at? Oh, we look at the outsiders, the people who are now coming. It's not prosperity. It's not we have 100 of these, so you can have one, I'll keep 99. Now there are only two, I'm not sharing. Right? This is a mindset. So it's Jesus working with the psychology. 2,000 years ago, he wrote this. He could have sat, got interviewed by Fox or CNN or BBC and said, hey, here is a parable for you today. So the famine made the situation that much harder. So we're thinking now this kid has no chance. How is he even going to get enough money to get back? Remember what I told you. When you traveled back to your homeland, it wasn't safe passage. You had to be very, very careful because you could land in Samaria if you were Jewish, and they knew you because you were circumcised, or the way you dressed. I talked about, the patterns of dress. So the colors, the dress, the circumcision, the way you did your hair, every piece gave a little bit about you that made it very dangerous for you to leave your homeland. So he went to a faraway country. Now, so remember, this is a Jewish kid. So he went and got acquainted with one of the citizens of the country. So some local took mercy on him. But what is he going to get? Famine. So I don't have plenty to share. So he asked him to work, and he sent him to the field to feed the swine. That's like a mortal sin if you're reading the Hebrew Bible. That's like the lowest state you could ever be in. You're not only, I mean, they saw swine, pigs as something unclean and filthy, and they did not want to associate with it. But now this kid has to actually feed it and live amongst the swine. He's in a sty. And he carved, I think I need to change my glasses. Sorry. The light and the font are not helping me. And he craved to fill his stomach with the husks that the swine were eating, and yet no man would give him. So not even the feed for the pigs was accessible to him. And when he came to himself, he said, how many hired workers are now in my father's house who have plenty of bread, and I am here perishing with hunger? So that's the moment. That's, I've heard ministers talk about the hitting rock bottom. That was his rock bottom when he was giving better food than he was getting to the pigs. So, and he got his wisdom. He opened his eyes. Now, okay, imagine all the people who are listening to Jesus pulling on beards, thinking he got what was coming to him. He broke the inheritance laws. He did all the bad things that young kids do, and now he's starving. He had it coming. Okay, see, it's in alignment with the judgment. We want to judge, and Jesus knew that they wanted to judge. They already condemned this kid. I will rise and go to my father and say to him, my father, I have sinned before heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Just make me like one of your hired workers. So he's going to humble himself. He's rehearsing this. He knew that he had a lovely place, lovely status, that everything was going to work out in his life, but he wanted more. And by wanting more, he lost everything. So now he is going to the mercy of the Father. And people are going like, yeah, that's not going to work, dude. You messed up. And he rose up and came to his father. And while he was yet at a distance, his father saw him and had compassion on him. And he ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. See the awwa? You see the relationship between God and us? When we repent, when we turn, not this kind of like, oh, is that I'll let him come and kiss my feet and cry a little bit, which was what we think of repentance. Instead, he spotted him, the father did, ran and grabbed him and kissed his neck. His boy is back. His boy is alive. His child is alive. This is God. This is us when we repent. That's how God feels. This is. I think I spoke about the lamb and the sheep. I think not far from here. How the shepherd would rejoice when he finds the one lamb out of the 99 that got lost. Same thread, same love. And especially if you were almost gone. He almost lost that boy. So he's back. But his father said, what is so here's a kid had to deliver his line, even though his father is taking him in. And his son said to him, my father, I have sinned before heaven and before you, and I am not worthy to be called your son. The speech he rehearsed. But his father said to his servants, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. So the kid was like a mess. And now he's putting the robe that actually declares. Remember the colors? That declares that he's back in the family. And put the ring, that's the family ring. So people will know you're not just back. You're back and you're in. You're fully accepted. Your membership was never canceled, right? So this is the kingdom. You're in, and we're born into it. We're not born into sin and iniquity. We're born into it. See, Jesus gives you that. That's why he told Nicodemus and John, you have to be born again, because you lost your way. You walked away from it. Now you can come right back into it, and the Father will take you right in. The Allah will take you right in. If ya Rabba, call it what you want. If Father is a trigger word, but it's strictly cultural. So whatever sounds good to you, use it. This was written for the Arameans of the East. This is how they think. And bring and kill the fat ox. So he throws a party. Now, so all of this, people are going like, what a foolish dad, right? If you're not attached to and listen to Jesus about who the Father is, you're thinking about how we think, how we judge, how we define culture and pass it generation to generation. Jesus is coming with a sledgehammer and slamming all that, crushing the bad stuff that we carry and using the goodness in it to actually bring us back to our roots, to compassion, to love. Forget this judgment. Forget, what people are thinking. Forget what everybody is thinking about you. Always do the right thing. And if it risks your life, so be it. He said, don't fear that, because you're living in fear. You're not alive. And that's the other part of it, is how do you stand up to what's happening in the world? Little things. Don't be afraid to like something that you agree with. Don't be afraid to forward something that you believe should be heard around the world. And make sure it's aligned with the kingdom. Because if you are spreading the other stuff, if you are making people afraid of each other, if you're spreading, this is what Jesus is talking about creating that divide, creating the bad stuff. And you can say, I'm Christian, or I go listen to the Noora Foundation, I'm a member in the Noora Foundation. But if you're passing that stuff, then you're not aligned with the Jesus message. So be careful in your like and your forward, but when you do it, make sure it's aligned with the kingdom. Don't be afraid to do that. But his father said to his servants, bring the rope, okay, fat ox, for this is my son who was dead and has come to life, and was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. So they're like, okay, party, the kid is back. We're happy. If the father is happy, we're all happy. Now he flipped, but his elder son was in the field. How am I doing on time? I think I'm good, and I have one question. I probably can address it. But his elder son was in the field, and as he came near the house, he heard the voice of the singing of many. So that the elder son, just like he was being trained, taking care of the field and taking care of the property, he's doing his duties as the eldest son. But he also has expectations, right? If you're the Hidayah, you know your spot, you know your duties. And he called one of the boys and asked him what it was all about. He said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fat ox because he received him safe and well. So is this what he wanted to hear? The repentance, remember our version of repentance, I want that kid to go and sleep outside. Remember, even the kid was prepared to just treat me as one of the laborers. Just let me sleep with them, let me eat their food, just give me a chance to, survive. And instead, the father is the fat ox and a party. Are you kidding? And he became angry and would not go in. So his father came out and besought him. So they're saying, okay, now we have a big drama. That the eldest, the Hidayah, is upset. And Jesus is our guide to the Hidayah behavior. So this is not the Hidayah behavior he's trying to teach us. But he said to his father, so the father came out. Imagine God chasing you out, going, what could be wrong with what I'm doing? Imagine God saying that. That's what Jesus is giving us here. How many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your commandment. This is the eldest son. And yet you never gave me even a kid, a small goat, that I might make merry with my friends. So the father is a hard father. He's teaching him all the lessons, how to take care of things, how to do things. And he's now going like, look, this bad brother of mine who wasted the money, slept and ate with the swine, is now you're holding a party for him with the fat ox, with like the most prized animal you could sacrifice, or you could have a feast around. But for this son of yours, not my brother, this son of yours, I've heard my mom say that every time I did something bad, she would say that to my dad. This son of yours is always, when it was good, it was his or her, credit to take. But when I did something bad, it was whoever was discovering it was pointing the finger at the other. Um, and I was challenging, let's say, when I was growing up. Um, but for this son of yours, after he had wasted your wealth, and with harlots, and came back, you have killed the fat ox. So this is the awwal, right? His father said to him, my son, you are always with me, and everything which is mine is yours. Exact message that we get from Jesus. When they asked him, how will we know the Father? And he said, I've been with you all this time, to his disciples, to the people closest to him, and you don't recognize me? Meaning, I am showing you the Father. So the father here is saying the same thing to his son. Everything that's mine is yours. It was right for us to make merry and rejoice, for this your brother was dead, and he come to life, and was lost and is found. So what a lovely, lovely way for the dynamic of the father son to be displayed in this parable. And what a way for that he addressed judgment, relationship between all of us, families, brothers and sisters, and all the dynamics that we have expectations of each other. Imagine if we're all acting as the Hidayah. That's what Jesus wanted from us. Act like you know God, and then represent that in your life every day. So I'm so glad I covered both things I wanted to talk about today. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I think I have some ideas though. So let me take your questions, and I only have one. So if you have others, please drop them in. In Matthew 10:34-36, Jesus appears to suggest that there might be a reason for violence. Is he referring to occupation? Is it possible that our siblings are our enemies, reincarnated from a previous life? Is it possible that those in our family will be the hardest to detach from and be able to individually ascend? Is it something metaphysical only, suggesting just arguments about God? So let me see. So in Matthew 10:34-36. Yeah, so I'm just going back a little bit to make sure that I get the context of where he was coming from. Therefore, fear not, you are much more important than many sparrows. Then in 34, do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to earth. I have not, okay, I know where you're coming. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and the man's enemies will be the members of his own household. No, he's not promoting violence here. So what I think I spoke about this, and I'm not sure if I covered it kind of like holistically last time I spoke. But when Jesus started recruiting people and bringing them into the movement, they he could see the friction because just like I talked about judgment, when you're in a crowd, that's I did the parable or the story of Jesus saving the woman who's taken in adultery from being stoned. The movement was to stone her. They had the paper, the law in their hand, the law of Moses about adultery, and they were ready to stone her. Jesus, not being a part of that thinking and seeing her life as a precious life, and then seeing also how people end up in that position. See, he was after root cause. He stood by her. And by doing so, he risked his life, but he did not pick the violent part. He did not grab stones and start throwing them at the people who wanted to kill her. He resisted peacefully, and he then tapped on their hearts, and then he asked them, have you never ever done anything bad? And if so, go ahead and throw a stone. So in the Jesus movement, he knew from the beginning that people are going to start going against each other. And I see this in my culture today. I mean, I grew up in a place where people wanted to, either deal with the fact that we are refugees. So we all survived a genocide. My parents did. They ran away, different countries, ended up meeting, and I was second generation refugee. But then looking at the first generation refugees, they were not all on the same page. Some moved on, some hunkered down, and within the households, people were recruited by different movements and different ideologies and so forth. So you could see that tension of we are going to do it this way, we're going to do it that way. And Jesus saw that happening in his. When you start becoming the peacemaker, when you start refusing to judge and follow, when you start wanting to demonstrate love towards the Romans and the Samaritans and so forth, he knew that these households and these people he's talking about, I'm not going to make any um, assumptions about how people live today. But even today in households, when you start getting people, when you have a Catholic household and then one of the kids goes to a Protestant church, that tension grows. When somebody who's Christian wants to marry a Muslim. So he could see the fabric of their society coming apart. But he thought, and I agree with him, that until we rip those fake connections and break down the culture back into the family of God, that tension will always exist. And our role is to be mature, is not to act like the eldest son in the parable and be self-righteous, because we are. I mean, I've heard that from, my family has Orthodox and Catholics and Eastern Catholics and Eastern Orthodox and evangelical and so forth. I mean, we're all over the board. And when we get together, it becomes kind of like a race to the bottom. What's the most common denominator we can? We love the hell out of each other. So thank goodness that the love that we have for one another has kept us very close and very together. But if you do bring up an ideology, then ideologies are always going to divide, regardless. I mean, you might get to like agree, and then there will be one point, and that's how the Christian religion scattered. Because of the interpretations about Jesus's nature or this law or that law or what was meant by this. And usually it was done by people who didn't even understand the culture or live in it or understood the language and its subtleties. So this is what we do here. So no, Jesus was not wanting violence. He expected that violence might come, especially from not his followers, but from the other side. And sure enough, they were persecuted. The early Christians would, we hear that they were singing going into the Colosseum and being eaten by lions because they refused to, fight. And that's that, how many of those shows do you think, Rome was hungry for blood? Everything we see about them today, we know that they were hungry for blood. How many of those shows do you think sold out the Christians? How many times can you go to the stadium and watch people who are peaceful, loving, committed no crime, and are being tortured in public? After once, twice, maybe you go like, this is not right. And that's what shook Rome. That's what eventually made Rome switch into Christianity. They co-opted it. They took it in. They said, okay, fine, you're going to break us and break our culture and break what we love doing. You're keeping our kids from joining military. And because, if you follow Jesus, you would never join a military. You can't fight. You can't do violence towards your brothers and sisters, no matter what language they speak, what part of the world they live in, what religion they believe in. You're above all of that. So Jesus knew, though, that by his message, by his belief system, that he was that sword of truth. It's metaphorical. He did not mean it the sword. He said, "I am the sword," because my teachings are going to divide between the right way and the traditional way. And that division, when you belong to it, he always told people, don't chase money, don't bury treasures, but he wasn't against prosperity. He has a ton of parables talking about hard labor and investing and so forth, and when people trust you with money, go do the right thing with it. Don't be afraid, multiply. There is plenty. So he also wasn't, somebody who's against it, but he saw it as a tool. And when they even wanted him to speak against the tax of the Romans, he's like, this is their money, this is their system. They print this stuff, so why fight with them over it? If you're going to use it, then be a part of the system. And it drove people crazy because they wanted to catch him doing the wrong thing. And he understood society. That's why I said early on, he knew that if he screwed up with society, he's on his own. Back to all the way to the first days of his ministry when he went into the desert. You mess up, God doesn't come and pick you up magically. He saw no magic in God. The only magic in God is the ability to live and love one another and count on God giving us what we need. And that's why you knock, the door will open. You ask, you will receive. I know there are more into the question. I'll look into it, and if there is more I need to address, I'll talk about it next time. For now, one more. Thank you. Okay, one more question. We are at 5 o'clock. So I'm always looking for questions. I'm glad you put them right at the end. I'll grab them. I always download a copy of the Q&A, and I'll address them next time. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Sorry I went actually I'm right on time. Appreciate your support. Appreciate your whatever you send in keeps us going, and we're looking at expanding and doing more. I'm doing more with YouTube and Rebecca and Dr. Eriko, so and Tom and Lynn, so that our team is really excited. We're seeing the numbers kind of grow, and we're doing more online. So we really appreciate your support. Most importantly, your time. Thank you so much. And remember, next week, tomorrow, don't forget. Those things are fun. And then next week, it will be the three of us again. So see you soon, and until next week or tomorrow.